Thanks for that tremendous welcome. It really does make us feel very special, and I'm sure that by the end of today you'll realise that we're nothing special at all. Our success is directly attributed to two very special couples, Pat and Greta Gregory and Jerry and Mandy Scriven, to whom Angela and I will be very, very grateful to for their superb system and personal development program which they've given us in order to build the business. Your applause is welcomed, but you should be directed towards them, our upline in the US and our other UK leaders who have developed and made a significant contribution towards its success. We both feel very humbled and privileged to have been asked by Pat and Greta and Jerry and Mandy to share our story with you today. And we hope that we'll be able to help at least one of you understand that whatever your challenges are and your circumstances, with the help and support available, you can build this business. We know that despite some of the struggles that we had, that if we can do it, you can do it. Now, if you don't relate to us, please don't judge our story on the business. Please come back and see another person speaking. We've been made to feel very special and very privileged by the hospitality extended this afternoon, and we'd like to thank the team for that. We'd also like to congratulate those recognised, and I think it really is incredible when you think about the growth we've experienced over the last couple of months with 75 silvers in March. I think it says it all. Now, please don't be fooled into thinking that Angela and I are anything special. We aren't. And it's only just over a few years ago that we started to realise what dreams really mean. I saw this business 3 years ago, although Angela didn't, and didn't want to have anything to do with it, and I'm sure you've heard that before, and said that she would support me. Well, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to a very, very special lady, a wonderful wife, a great mother to our two children, and somebody I'm very proud of. Will you please welcome Angela? Go for it.
Right, hello everyone. Thank you for that tremendous welcome. It really is reassuring to see your smiling faces out there. I'm not going to see many of you, but I certainly wasn't born to be a public speaker. But through this wonderful business we are all involved in, and especially the brilliant system we have at our fingertips, I feel a lot more confident and standing up here speaking to you. It's just a matter of getting your butterflies to fly in formation and reading Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. As Steve has said, we feel very privileged and honoured to be asked to speak today by two very special couples, Pat and Greta Gregory and Jerry and Mandy Scriven. We certainly don't take this opportunity lightly and feel very humbled even to be asked. As Steve said, we're certainly nothing special. We're just two ordinary people who had an extraordinary desire to move on in life. We're just like you out there today, wanted to make a better life for yourselves and a better future for your families. Now, my background is nothing out of the ordinary. I had a happy and secure childhood and have a sister and brother who are 12 and 10 years older than me. Apparently, I was a mistake, but as my mum says, a very welcome one, and now she says I keep her feeling younger. My parents were originally from London, but just before I was born, they moved to a village in Essex. So yes, I'm an Essex girl. Even we can build this business. All I can really remember of my younger days was playing in our garden, which was huge. It had an orchard with loads of trees to climb and an old caravan at the bottom, which used to be a hideaway, and was a paradise in the summer holidays. My father seemed to be working almost 7 days a week at the village butcher's he owned, and this proved too much in the end when my father's hard work took its toll and he had a severe stroke. I was about 10 at the time and knew little of what was going on, except he was seriously ill. My mum was informed he would not walk or speak again properly, but the so-called experts didn't know my father, who had a dogged determination coupled with a lot of pride, and he proved them wrong. Steve has always said I get my stubbornness from my father, but since being in this business, I like to call it perseverance. Anyway, he was told he shouldn't carry on at the butcher's, as it was too much pressure on him, so my parents sold up and moved 3 miles away to Clacton, where they bought a small confectioner's, and we lived above the shop. Now, on one hand, I thought this was wonderful, as I absolutely adore chocolate, and on the other hand, I hated it, as there's hardly any garden, and I felt totally lost and confused at my new school. After overcoming some of my shyness, I eventually settled down to scrape through my 11 plus and go on to high school. Now, the only lessons I liked there were sport and typing, so as you've probably gathered, I'm not exactly an academic, but I went on to the local college in Colchester to study a 2-year secretarial and commerce course. Now, my time there proved quite eventful, as this is where I met Steve, who was on a day release course for his print apprenticeship. He had a reputation for being a bit of a Jack the Lad, and people thought we were not suited at all, including my family, who were not particularly happy with our relationship. They say opposites attract, don't they? Well, before the business, I thought we were well suited, being Gemini and Libram. All the astrology books say so. But since the business, I know we are well suited after reading Personality Plus, which is a must to read to understand each other's personalities. Once I understood Steve's sanguine choleric personality and my phlegmatic character, I started to understand and accept all the things Steve used to do which annoyed me. I really believe that book has helped our relationship and also helped me immensely in understanding other people's actions and also my own. Now, despite everything, Steve and I became very close, and he was a great support to me throughout my father's continued illness, especially when he had another stroke, which resulted in him being in and out of hospital for the next few years. And looking back now, I realise it was one of the lowest points of my life, seeing someone you love who had so much pride and will to live gradually just give up hope. I only wish my father had had the chance to see this business, as he never really had the opportunity to enjoy life with my mum, although he worked so hard to give us everything. Now, I talk about my father not to be morbid, but just to share with you that working hard in a job or your own business doesn't always pay off. He never even had the chance to enjoy retirement. And it has meant my mum has been on her own these past years, although she has helped us get through some difficult times more than she will ever know. You are only given one chance to life, and I strongly believe you should live it to the full and not be a slave to a job or business for 40 years. That's why this business is the greatest opportunity any of us is likely to come across, as it gives precious time back to you. Now, this was further endorsed when I ended up working for the Inland Revenue typing pool for the next 4 years. I knew I had to find something else, as there were no prospects for career advancement for me at all. I saw an advert for a cashier's position at a local building society. Now, I knew this might prove a challenge, as I only had grade 3 CSE maths, but I went for it anyway. I set my goal and was determined to get that job, and I did. I even ended up as a chief cashier. Now, by this time, Steve and I were married, and we started to settle into an old married couple routine. But then Steve started to feel unsettled with his job at a Colchester printing company. There was a lot of union unrest, and he answered an advert in the Daily Mail for a job in Dubai in the Middle East, which he was offered after the first interview. Now, after the initial shock, we talked it over, and it was my mum who finally helped us realise it was a golden opportunity not to be missed, just like this business. My parents had had the chance once to emigrate to Canada, but had decided not to go. But on reflection, Mum wondered what would have happened if they had emigrated and given it a go. It's so much like this business. If you don't give it a real go, you'll always be wondering, what if? Remember, today's decisions are tomorrow's realities. Anyway, as I received a reduced mortgage with the Building Society, it was decided I wouldn't join Steve immediately, but wait and see if his job worked out. So Steve went off to Dubai on a 2-year contract with high expectations, and I followed a few months later for a holiday and to make sure all was well. When I realised what a fabulous lifestyle we could have out there together, and the fact Steve and I really didn't like living apart, as soon as I got back to the UK, I made arrangements to rent our house out, leave my job and fly back again to Dubai. We ended up being there not for 2 years but nearly 10, and I have a lot of fond and happy memories of our time abroad. Namely, lots of barbecues and beach parties, entertainment in 5-star hotels and fabulous restaurants, Pims by the swimming pool in the back garden, membership to all sorts of sports facilities, camping trips in the Oman Mountains, having the luxury of someone doing the housework and ironing, having no worries regarding mortgage, gas, water and electricity bills, as they were paid for, and the freedom to travel to lots of exotic places, and generally just having a whale of a time. Now, although we enjoyed our time abroad, we worked hard also, and I had some very varied secretarial jobs with British companies and gained a lot of experience dealing with people of all nationalities. Living and working abroad forced me to lose some of my shyness, and it gave me a valuable insight in that it made me open my eyes to the fact there's a great wide world out there waiting to be explored, which has helped me immensely dreaming big enough in this business of the exciting places we are all going to travel to in the future. Now, although we enjoyed life to the full while we were abroad, Steve and I did face some challenges with our relationship. And at those times, it was easy to feel isolated and vulnerable, as we had no family to turn to. But one thing it did teach us was to work things through logically, talk things over, and not walk away from life's challenges. It's a sound principle we should all work to in this business as well. Once you get it together with your partner or upline, the business will run far quicker for you. When we eventually sorted out our relationship and got it together, our first son was born in December 1987 in Dubai, which was quite an experience, but that's another story. And then nearly 2 years later, in July 1990, we moved back to the UK while I was expecting our second son. We still had a house in Essex, but Steve's company, which was based in Bristol, required us to move, so we were between Bristol and London. Of course, being loyal to the company, that's exactly what we did, and proceeded to move to a village in Berkshire. The company was prepared to pay for the bridging loan, and this was all put in writing. Everything seemed to go smoothly enough for several months until November 1990, when our world turned upside down. Steve telephoned to say he was on his way home, as he'd just been told he didn't have a job anymore. They were having to lay people off. So many things went through my mind, stupid things like, oh well, Steve will be home for when the new baby arrives in a month's time. He'll be able to look after Jason and do all the shopping, etc. And then it suddenly dawned on me, how are we going to live? How are we going to pay the mortgage? How are we going to pay the second mortgage? More importantly, how are we going to pay for the bridging loan? Now, at that time, with the interest rates as they were, it was totting up at a staggering £1,000 a month. I nearly had the baby there and then. We decided things would be okay, as we were still owed a lot of money by the company, and also the company had agreed to cover the bridging loan, as they had wanted us to move. But their advisors instructed them to call in the receivers, which they did, and thereby sidestepping any responsibilities they had. We certainly weren't the only victims. There were a lot of others who suffered too. We suddenly found ourselves totally vulnerable. The savings we still had left were soon eaten up. And as Jerry and Mandy Kent said on their rally tape, we found ourselves not just broke, but in debt and broke. We still looked okay on the outside, with a nice house, etc., but we were still broke, but just at a different level. It was frightening how quickly our circumstances had changed, and because of the mortgage rates at the time, we couldn't even give our houses away. Amidst all this confusion, along came our second son, Matthew, at the end of 1990, still failing to plan, as he was another December baby. December is a very expensive month for us. Matthew certainly brightened an otherwise dull Christmas, and then in January came the funny phone call from Steve's brother Gary, a legal executive who was handling our legal case against Steve's old company. Now, he knew Steve had been contacted to see another networking business, but although Steve had liked the concept, the product didn't appeal, but that's filtered water under the bridge. Now, Gary mentioned he'd just become involved with an exciting opportunity that we might be interested in. Now, to say Steve was looking would be a gross understatement, as he was still unemployed and desperate to do something. As for me, I was still in a world of my own after the arrival of Matthew, and the thought of trying to contend with something else after only about 4 hours sleep a night didn't exactly appeal to me in the least. But Gary mentioned he'd be passing by on Sunday afternoon with a couple called Mike and Caroline Price, who were great friends and colleagues of his. Now, we were in our normal winter Sunday afternoon state, slouched in front of the TV when they arrived, looking terribly excited and beaming from ear to ear. I remember thinking, what's made them look so happy? They explained they'd been to Torquay for a 2-day seminar called Dream Weekend. I thought, right, okay, that's a conversation stopper, and went and made a cup of tea. Mike and Caroline showed a one-on-one with Steve in the dining room, while I kept coming in every so often with the baby in my arms, thinking it looked like a pyramid and not taking a lot of notice. Although I did see the lights go on in Steve's eyes, and a nagging thought was at the back of my mind, why would Caroline, a solicitor, Mike, a tax officer, and Gary, also in the legal profession, be involved in something like this if it was illegal or unethical? It really wouldn't be in their interest. And considering I had seen hardly any of the presentation, how I came to that conclusion it was a pyramid is now beyond me. And if anyone had asked me what did I know about pyramid selling, I now realise I knew very little. It's so easy for all of us to prejudge this business without the full facts. Our minds are like parachutes. If they're not open, they won't work. And at the time we saw the plan, I had a very closed mind, as I felt I didn't want to trust anyone again, because we had been let down over the past year by someone we had classed as a true friend. I just didn't want to believe that there was anyone out there that could actually help us and would want to help us for that matter. But I now know that this business is all about helping others to achieve. When you help others to achieve their goals and dreams, you can't help but achieve yours too. Now, isn't that a very ethical business principle? Steve and I think so. Now, the upshot of that one-on-one was that Steve took myself and the children to visit my mum a couple of days later and casually mentioned he'd be going on to see Mike and Caroline for a follow-up. As I had no idea or interest what a follow-up entailed, I didn't take a lot of notice and off he went. A couple of hours later, he arrived back and whispered in my ear we had signed up in the business. Now, to this day, I don't remember signing the application form, although all our bonuses and correspondence come in both names. I didn't think it at the time, but I'm now very pleased Steve didn't omit me from the board of directors. And more importantly, we will always be eternally grateful for Gary and Mike and Caroline stopping off that day and sharing this opportunity with us. Although how we became involved in this business is a little unconventional, it certainly endorses what the major functions can do to all our businesses. We were sponsored, or rather Steve was sponsored, because of Gary's and Mike and Caroline's obvious excitement and enthusiasm from that Torquay function. And certainly we have found, after every major function we have been to, our business has moved on by leaps and bounds. And we're really excited knowing that Family Reunion is fast approaching in July. I know it's going to help everyone who puts plans in place now to get there, whatever their challenges. A week before our first plan, I remember Steve telephone inviting people while I insisted on having the TV blaring in the background. So as you can gather, initially I was no support to him whatsoever in the contacting inviting. For our first plan, one of our upline drove from Suffolk over a 2-hour journey to present it. And at the time, he must have thought, why did he bother? Because when he asked where the products were, as there were still negative products everywhere, we told him they were still in the product starter pack sitting in the hall. And I've always felt terrible looking back on that and recommend that everyone who gets started in this business to change over to positive products as soon as possible. To not only show 100% commitment to upline who are coming in to help you, but also to increase your own belief in the business and the products themselves. Although the plan wasn't a qualified success at the time, one of the couples did become involved 6 months later and is now a direct leg themselves. You just never know who will come back to you. They will always be looking to see how you are getting on. Our first leg ended up being at distance, a good 4 hours away, which isn't really recommended to start with. But being new to the area, we just didn't really know many people locally. We would like to say a big thank you to all our upline who live nearer to that leg, for without them, that particular group would never have got up and running. As due to our financial circumstances, Steve was unable to support them as much as he would have liked. And this goes back to the principles of success in this business, which are geared to helping others to succeed first. And on reflection, I understand why Steve was so determined to make this business work, after having worked so hard for the success of others, only to find disappointment and no rewards for his efforts down the road. It was at this point of sponsoring our first leg, I started taking more interest and becoming more involved in the business. Up until then, I just let Steve get on with it. One area was the paperwork. I couldn't cope any longer seeing Steve make a mess of it. I suppose it was the secretary and me coming out, but looking back, it was, I'm sure, a ploy to get me to do it. But Steve never forced me into the business, but was always very patient and let me come on board in my own time. And quite often you will find one partner not so positive about the business. And we've found that just being patient and encouraging them one step at a time to plug into the system we all have at our disposal works wonders, and eventually they will hear the things they need to. With myself, I realised I needed to be positive when speaking to our downline. And just speaking positive works wonders. It gets through to your subconscious mind and you actually start believing what you're saying. The book What to Say When You Talk to Yourself helped me understand that principle and helped me overcome many doubts about my abilities. After a time, I did start becoming more interested in the tapes and books, but would never actually admit it to Steve. I'd listen to the tapes and read snippets of the books while he wasn't around. And I used to give Steve a hard time about the tapes and books, and we had several high-volume discussions about the cost of the tools. I just couldn't understand why Steve was paying out for them while he was unemployed and we didn't have any spare cash. I just couldn't and wouldn't accept they would help us move on in the business. When I eventually started to plug into the system myself, I realised Steve wasn't wasting our money, but rather investing in our own business and our future. And And one of our diamonds summed it up when they said, "There's only one thing that's worse than having no system, and that's having a system at your fingertips and not using it." How true that is.